Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Wang, and I will be presenting my work on the DB application development homework assigned for class CSC 582. In this assignment, I was meant to choose a suitable language technology and implement a connection to a database. Once I'm connected to the database, my code should be able to, one, display multiple rows from a query result, two, have a multi-statement transaction where all the statements succeed, and three, have a multi-statement transaction where the earlier statements succeed, the later statement fails, and in this case, the whole transaction must be rolled back. So I have a written prompt here I'll be depending on for this presentation, but ultimately speaking, we'll start with the technologies that I used and some of the work I had to do for installation. So I use for my Java uh, to write my code Eclipse workspace. So the Eclipse IDE for Java developers, I installed that first, and then I also installed MySQL. And the original intent was to use something similar to what was provided in class. So this getting started with a Java tutorial, and I wanted to originally use everything in MySQL, but unfortunately I ran out of time attempting to make it all run through a single command point. I know that it should be doable using the MySQL 8.0 command line client, where I should be able to log into MySQL, and then using the JDBC connector, I should be able to connect and write my code directly here. That's at least what it demonstrates over here with the ant jar, ant create MySQL database, ant setup, and I've connected as much as I should to the path environment variable. But I decided to go with this route, utilizing the IDEs more. It's a little less ambitious, but it's a little more clear and comfortable for me since I used Eclipse IDE for JavaScript projects in the past. So what I did was I created a new package, MySQL demo, and then I went into properties and I connected the MySQL connector or connector J jar file as an external jar here so that it can communicate directly with MySQL. So that way, anything I write in here should affect the database. And we'll be able to see that directly in the MySQL as we move forward. Now, the primary database I work with is classic models, and I primarily use the table customers to perform the required demonstrations. We're gonna take a look at that real quick here. This is the database I use, classic models. And in fact, this comes from a pretty straightforward MySQL sample database. It's like the very first thing you find when you Google search sample SQL databases. And what I like about this page is that I get an ERD so that I can create or manufacture a certain type of failure that you're going to see here shortly when I attempt to create a failure with the exact same statement. Because for task 2 and 3, where you have multi-statement transactions, it should run perfectly fine the first time, and the second time it should fail, and I know exactly why it should fail, but I also have indicator flags that'll tell us if it succeeds or fails, and we can look at the direct database as well. So let's get started. The first is to display multiple rows from a query result. And give me one moment here. That is going to be in my select commands. So we'll run through this really quick. This is importing the Java libraries necessary in order to understand certain commands such as connection, statement, result set, SQL exception, et cetera, et cetera. This is a standard beginning main, and then we have the connection, which we set here with JDBC, MySQL. I use a local database under port 3306. Database name is classic models, username root, and this is the password I set for myself. And then I define a statement where connection.create statement that equals that statement, right? The first string S, I will select customer number, name, and sales rep employee number from the customers table. And then I define a result set as whatever occurs after executing that query, or string S. And as long as this is progressing, we will define these variables. So we get the int from customer number, and we define that in Java as int cust num, string cust name, string sales rep employee num. Each of these is just setting that directly from the result. coming from the SQL query itself. So we're pulling that and then we're setting it as a Java variable equivalent here. And then we do this print line so that we get each one of those records comes out in this format where you get the variable space, variable space, variable. This is to close connection. And then I get this nice flag, and I have this for both of my classes technically here. Query executed. That means that it's a success. So if I run this right now, the result should be a list of customer number, customer name, and sales representative employee number from customers. And that's what we have here. So this would be, I think, a very good example of displaying multiple rows from a query result. Now, the next part where it's having a multi-statement transaction where all the statements succeed and the transaction commits, I will go on to my next one here for transaction commands. And so what's different here is that we set the connection to set auto commit false so that it does not immediately commit the statements one by one. So it'll only run the entire query through once we hit this connection commit stage. But we have added a try catch here, so it will go through this process, but if at any point there is an exception or if there's a failure, then it'll immediately roll back the beginning step or stage. So we're gonna run through this once and it should succeed. And we have here multiple different strings for multiple different statements. What we're gonna do is we're gonna input and insert here for me, Stephen Wang, and some of my information here, and we're going to add that to the customer's table. Then this is another example here, but based on the ERD that I had previously, if I just bring it up here, it has a foreign key dependency on employees. So the employee number cannot be a random number. I created a random number here for 1480. If there's no relationship or there's no actual reference, then that statement should fail. And so what we're gonna do is then this should update my name and then this should delete. So we're gonna get rid of both of these for now. And that means we only want to run S and T. And so what should happen is that this runs perfectly. We just add my information in there and then update my last name based on customer number. So if I run this now, we see here query executed. If I want to go take a look here real quick, run the query again to take a look at the options. Here is me, Stephen Marsison, and here's my information, right? Now, we know that these two work. We know at the very least this statement automatically works. So by definition, for the third task, have a multi-statement transaction where the earlier statement succeed and the later statement fails. Now I'm going to purposely add in this string where it will cause a failure. But first, I need to already roll back, because if I try to insert twice at the same time, it'll fail because there has to be unique records. This first number is a unique record. It's a primary key. So before I do anything, let me just delete this so that we return them back to our original query executed. My input should be gone. String U. Oh, I did not actually commit it. Here we go. Query executed. And now it's gone. So now we start with our original database, right? I'm going to unleash everything to an extent. So now it should do exactly what it did before. It'll insert this value. It should fail on this value because of this dependency. This is a foreign key based on the employee, because this is ultimately the sales representative employee number. This needs to have a valid corresponding employee here. So if it does not have an actual employee number, it will it will bomb out, it will fail. So I plan for that to fail, and thus we should hit a point of transaction rollback. So we allow all of these to run. And we hit transaction rollback, which means that none of this occurred or happened. Even though we know that this first one works because we've done it before, we did it in the last example, it did not progress here. Because if I go into customers right now, my name is not here under customer number 104. So it rolled back the entire transaction. And yeah, this is my demonstration for the 3 tasks of our DB application development homework. Once again, my installation materials were the Eclipse IDE for Java developers, MySQL Workbench in order for clarity, and the MySQL sample database found here under Classic Models database. And some other resources that I used were for learning the coding. I use the Java tutorials here for transactions as well as rollback. I did attempt to try and do the original documentation. I really wanted to use the database that they had, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. And I have to give a shout out to this video as well, and this will be part of my written prompt, SQL Tutorial 14, JDBC, Java Database Connectivity with MySQL. Just seeing the code in action, being able to adjust and work through it for the beginning steps for basic things like insert, update, and so on was a very big help. So I'm just giving credit where credit is due in that regard. And otherwise, that is my presentation. I will be adding on the files from my project here, or the code at the very least. And this should be up on YouTube, and everyone will be able to see the URL pretty quickly. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you guys have a great day.